I'm Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle Now. Bill, Texas recently passed House Bill 89, which basically keeps the state from doing business with companies who are involved in boycotting Israel, the so-called BDS movement. What is that? Boycott, divestment, and sanctions. And so the state decided we're not going to do business with those kinds of people, those kinds of companies. And recently, there's been a story in several news outlets, including the Times of Israel and I believe the Houston Chronicle, that a woman who's a speech pathologist who works with Arab-speaking people in a district near Austin is now suing the state of Texas because they are requiring her to sign this document that says she will never participate in a boycott of Israel. Now, Bill, this poses an interesting challenge, especially to conservatives, most of whom, or many of whom, are great supporters of the state of Israel and its important role that it has played in our defense and just friendship over the years. This is a First Amendment case. On the surface of it, without going into details legally, how does that strike you? Should this woman have to sign something that says that she will never be engaged in any kind of anti-Israel exercise of free speech?
Well, that's obviously not a free speech case, Scott. I mean, if I decide to work for somebody and they make me sign a non-disclosure form about something, then I'm giving up my freedom of speech to talk about this project that they've been working on for 20 years, and I've signed a legal document that limits my speech on that. If I work in the military, I am privy to secrets that I'm not allowed to talk about, and to complain about it is not a violation of my free speech. Who issued the order in this case, and who does this woman work for?
She is I'm assuming she's a contract employee of a school district, and of course school districts are an arm of state governments in most places I'm aware of.
Well then, okay, so if you don't want to do that, that's fine. A lot of people, Texas never ceases to amaze me, astonish me, please me, and give me hope in the dark of night. So you want to play the boycott game? Fantastic. If we're now not going to do we're going to boycott the boycotters. And if you don't like it, you're going to have to get another job, because the entire idea of the boycott, which presumably this woman supports in the first place, is to put all of Israel out of a job, right? I mean, that's ultimately what it's about. If this woman is saying, I'm not going to sign anything, it's a violation of my rights to sign a pledge that I'm not going to boycott the boycotters, it's because she thinks that BDS is a good idea for Israel. She wants the whole country put out of business. She wants to put the entire country out of business by not sending any American money or letting any American investments or anything. So, since that's the moral decision she's made for an entire nation of people, she can suffer the same moral consequences. If she doesn't like it enough, she can get another job.
She's not saying she's making this decision for a whole nation of people. And I think there's a distinction between this and an NDA, because a non-disclosure agreement basically says that I can't go tell people things about this organization, your organization, that I work for. It's a different thing to say, look, I have some private beliefs about the role of the state of Israel in the world. And if in the future I want to become an advocate for, or just personally myself boycott things from Israel, what business is that of the state?
Well, I'd have to read what the actual boycott letter said. I'd have to read what the letter is actually saying. But one thing I am completely sure of, Scott, and that is that your First Amendment right does not extend to doing or saying what you want to on somebody else's dime. Right? No one is saying this woman can't protest Israel. We're just going to assume that this is the case, but no one's saying she can't protest Israel. No one's saying she can't boycott Israel. No one's saying she can't wear a big old sign that says, I'm boycotting Israel. She just may not be able to do it while working for the school board of the state of Texas. And to me, this argument is exactly the same argument as we had with Colin Kaepernick, where he basically decides he's going to take a knee during the opening of a football game, and when he's told, presumably at least originally asked not to do that, he says, no, you're violating my freedom of speech. We're not violating your freedom of speech, Colin. You're wearing a uniform from the San Francisco 49ers. Let's say I own that company. Well, I own the 49ers. You're hurting my business. I'm telling you, you cannot take a knee on the field wearing my uniform. If you're going to take the knee, then you're fired. You can still take the knee, and you can take the knee outside the stadium, and you can take the knee outside the stadium in civilian clothes as an unemployed mediocre quarterback, but I don't have to pay you to damage my business And then you tell me that, no, I have a constitutional right to have you pay me to damage your business.
Now, it's quite possible that she's being inaccurate about this, but she is saying that the new clause that they added to her contract for the 2018-2019 school year requires that she, quote, not boycott Israel during the term of the contract, and that she's supposed to refrain from any action, quote, that is intended to penalize, inflict economic harm on, or limit commercial relations with Israel or a person or entity doing business in Israel or an Israeli-controlled territory. So it sounds here like they're not saying you can't be an advocate of this in the school district. They're saying that as long as you're under contract with us, you can't boycott Israel. Now, I know that this law was probably intended to deal with larger players than a speech pathologist in the Pflugerville school district, but it does seem like it's the state reaching out with its long arm of repression and saying, we have a point of view about the state of Israel, and if you don't agree with it, then we're going to fire you. I mean, that's essentially what happened to her.
Yeah, but you're putting the cart in front of the horse. You're saying that out of the clear blue sky, Texas decided that it was going to have policies towards Israel and make everybody enforce it. Like that just suddenly came out of the blue. Like it was the instigator of all of this. Like Texas lawmakers had nothing better to do in the 2 weeks they meet every 2 years than to say, you know what, by the way, we ought to make sure that everybody is not allowed to boycott Israel.
It was the first bill they passed in that session. They jumped right on there.
But they passed the bill first because it was a national movement, and this is a state government, and it is a government of people who still have some sort of moral core, and they know the difference between right and wrong, and they've decided, I'm sure they had to take a vote on it because there's no dictator in Texas. Last time I looked, I was pretty sure there was nobody there. They're pulling traffic cameras out of Texas. That's the freest place in the world. So, presumably, the lawmakers of the state of Texas took a vote and came to an agreement as a majority, passed a law, and then the law went into effect. Now, what's interesting about this is, what you said that this is aimed at bigger players, but, and the only person responding is this school teacher in...
Well, I'm not saying she's the only person responding. I'm just saying she's the one who's getting attention because the reason why she's suing is because she's a little woman in a town in Texas. She's not a big corporation, and public relations wise, this will sell better.
Of course. So my question is, why isn't everybody suing? I mean, how many people are required to take this oath in Texas? Any idea? Hundreds of thousands.
Anybody who
certainly.
contracts with the school district. And by the way, some 26 states have passed legislation forbidding their states from participating with companies that have been participants in this BDS stuff, this anti-Israel stuff. So it's not an isolated incident, but it could have widespread implications.
It could have widespread implications if we're too stupid to make the point that freedom of speech does not mean paid freedom of speech, and that freedom of speech does not mean that you get to bring your freedom of speech and use it as policy for the people that are paying you money. That's not what freedom of speech is. To say that Texas is censoring her speech would be to say actual censorship, actual violation of her First Amendment rights would sound like this. You are not allowed to criticize Israel. You're not allowed to deal with people who support the boycott of Israel. And if you do, we will put you in jail. That's what actual censorship looks like. This is not the same thing. She can get a job anywhere else. There's certainly a lot of people I know a lot of teachers out here in California be more than willing to hire her. And I know what conservative teachers out here have to go through. So if you want to make this a national issue, and you did, progressives, the people have spoken. They don't like it. And they're taking legal measures to make sure that a few progressives don't get to run the rest of the country the way they've been doing for decades now. They're not going to let a couple of lunatics drive that state anyway into this position of moral cowardice. They're literally laying down the law. No, we're not. We're not going to do that here. And so If it hurts this woman's feelings, that's fine, because that's what it is, because she is certainly... Look, Scotty, the fact that we even know about the case is an indication that her freedom of speech has not been abridged. If her actual freedom of speech had been abridged, she'd have disappeared into the memory hole along with all the rest of the communists and Nazis who spoke out against something they didn't like.
And I'm not sure if she's upset about the fact that the Times of Israel has a big story featuring her.
Well, let me ask you this. Should kids be required to say the Pledge of Allegiance?
Should kids be required to say the Pledge of Allegiance? I think on a moral basis, I would say, yeah, they should do that. I was offended when I saw a school teacher who didn't do it when I was in school. On the other hand, I'm reluctant to use the power of the state to mandate that a child has to say something he doesn't believe in.
I agree with you completely 100%. And so what does that leave us with? It leaves us with a gray area where politics used to not intrude into every single thing in the entire world. And not every single moment of our life was a political protest of some kind or another. And not everything we say has to be watched because the most easily offended person in America might take exception to something I might say in private to somebody. So therefore, I'd better watch my mouth. That's not this country. That's not the country that I grew up in. It's not the country I plan to die in. It's not America, and I'm going to fight it every step of the way. Now, this business of politicizing everything is a political right that you have in the United States, but that right comes with consequences. And if your employer doesn't like you doing this, they have a right to fire you. I don't have an obligation to hire a receptionist in a business who basically says, Jews came in. Oh, hello, Goldstein. I don't have that person does not have a right. That person does not have a constitutional right to free speech to insult my clients while I'm paying them to sit at a job I'm paying them for. She can say whatever she wants to about Jews out on the street. She has a right to do that. But she doesn't have a right to do it on my dime while I'm paying her. And that's what the contract stipulates. So if you don't like it, go work someplace else.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we carry on this fight 5 days a week, having these conversations about important issues of the day, usually framed around breaking news stories. And Bill Whittle brings you his insight and occasionally his wit and humor, but more often than not, his passion and zeal for truth and rule of law. We're grateful for those members at BillWhittle.com who make this possible by their membership dollars of $9.95 a month. We remind those watching on YouTube that you can click on that little Liberty bell, that notification bell that will send you regular updates every time we post a new video. More and more people are doing that, and we're grateful for that too. So for Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making this possible.